The phone rang just after 10. I almost didn't answer. I was elbow deep in unpacked boxes, my hands full of dish towels that still smelled like the old house. But something told me to pick it up. Mom Curtis said, without waiting for a hello, "Listen, Kiara's parents are coming this weekend. A few of her friends too." I smiled, still holding the phone between my shoulder and cheek. "Oh, that's nice. I can get the guest rooms ready. I've been meaning to. You're not staying in the house." I froze. "What, you'll stay in the shed? We'll clean it out. Kiara doesn't want her parents thinking we let an old woman hover over them all weekend. This is important to us." My voice caught in my throat. "Curtis, I thought you wanted me to—" "Don't argue. You already bought the place. The least you can do is not ruin it." I stood there in the middle of the kitchen I'd only just started to love. The cabinets I'd scrubbed yesterday. The counters I'd wiped clean with lemon oil. "If you embarrass us," he added, voice sharp, "I swear to God, Mom, I'll have you in assisted living by Monday. Don't test me." He hung up. I stayed very still, the silence of the empty house settling around me like dust. I took a breath, set down the towels, and walked toward the back door. The storage shed sat behind the garden beds Hank and I had once imagined. I opened it and stepped inside. There was no insulation. A rusted sink in the corner. Mice, probably. I stood there a long time just listening. Then I started clearing out the boxes. Not because he told me to. Because I needed to see what I was up against. Because Curtis thought I wouldn't fight. I made up the cot and swept the floor. Later, I found the small lamp from my nightstand and plugged it in. The bulb flickered, then steadied. That night, I lay down in the shed and stared at the ceiling beams. Tomorrow, I would start from the beginning. After Hank died, time stopped meaning much. The mornings came and went without wait. I'd make coffee and let it go cold, the same cup sitting untouched, until the sun dipped behind the trees. His chair in the kitchen stayed where it always was, pushed back just enough for him to slide in. For months, I couldn't bring myself to move it. Then one afternoon, a thick envelope arrived from the insurance company. I had almost forgotten Hank had a policy. We'd never talked about money like that. But when I opened it, my knees nearly gave out. $500,000. My hands shook so badly I spilled coffee across the letter. Hank had left me a fortune I didn't know existed. At first, the number terrified me. It felt too large for someone who'd never had, much too heavy for a woman who'd just buried her husband. I left it untouched in the bank, while I went through the motions, church grocery runs, half conversations with neighbors who meant well, but didn't know what to say. But at night I'd hear Hank's voice the way it used to sound when he talked about retirement. A little place in the hills away from traffic. Maybe a garden, maybe a few animals. Nothing fancy. He'd said it so often, it had become a promise I thought we'd keep together. That's when I decided. I would keep it for him. The search took weeks. Realtors showed me modern houses and glossy new developments, but I wanted something that felt older, gentler. When I saw the listing, a small farmhouse 2 hours outside Atlanta with a wraparound porch and an overgrown garden, I knew. The kind of place Hank would have stopped the truck to admire. Signing the deed felt like holding his hand again. I whispered his name under my breath as I wrote mine. That night, I drove there alone. The air smelled clean. The house stood quiet, waiting. I stepped onto the porch and said softly, "We made it, Hank." I remember the day I called Curtis like it was yesterday. The papers were signed, the house was mine, and for the first time in years I felt something close to joy. I wanted to hear my son's voice to tell him that the dream his father and I had talked about for decades had finally taken shape. He answered on the second ring. "Mom Curtis, you won't believe it," I said, almost laughing from excitement. "I found the perfect place. A farm in Georgia, 3 bedrooms, a little garden, even a porch. Your dad would have loved it." Silence stretched on the line. I thought maybe we'd lost the signal. Then his voice came back clipped and sharp. You bought what A farm, honey. With the insurance money. He didn't respond right away, and I could hear something in the background, a woman's voice. Kiara's. Then he spoke again, slower this time. You blew my inheritance on some farm. I blinked the words, not sinking in at first. Your inheritance. Yeah, Mom. Dad didn't mean for you to waste it like this. You could have invested it. Helped us with the house or hell anything useful. My throat tightened. Curtis, it wasn't wasted. This is what your father wanted. He talked about it for years. You always twist things he said. Voice rising. You just do what makes you feel good and call it love. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the deed in front of me. His tone wasn't just anger. It was disgust. Kiara said something muffled behind him, and he sighed loudly. Look, he said, we'll come down next weekend. Kiara wants to show her parents the place. But do me a favor, fix up the shed. We'll stay in the house. Don't make us look bad. He hung up before I could answer. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Then I reached for a notebook and wrote down every word he'd said. I didn't know why not yet. But something in me told me I'd need to remember. The message came early, before sunrise. My phone buzzed on the counter while I was making coffee. Janine's name flashed on the screen, a name I hadn't seen in years. We'd worked together at the insurance office back when life had a rhythm, when everything I owned still had Hank's fingerprints on it. You need to see this, her text said. A few minutes later, another message came through with a file attached. It's from the security feed, she wrote. Curtis was here yesterday. I hesitated before opening it. My stomach tightened as the video began to play. The timestamp was from the day before. The camera showed the bank's parking lot, sun-cutting sharp reflections off the car hoods. And there, leaning against his car, was Curtis. Kiara stood beside him, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her head. Their voices came through faint, but clear enough. Give her a few weeks, Curtis said. Let her get comfortable. Then we get my cousin to sign the papers she's unfit. We'll sell the place fast before she figures it out. Kiara's voice followed, lighter, almost amused. And we'll put her in a home. The cheaper the better. Old people don't last long when they're moved out anyway. The sound of his laugh turned my stomach. I paused the video halfway through and stared at the frozen image of my son. The same boy who once fell asleep on Hank's lap during Sunday movies, who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Then I pressed play again, forcing myself to hear every word. When the clip ended, I saved it to my desktop. My hands were steady as I renamed the file, curtisplan.move. Outside, the morning had gone pale. I closed the laptop, sat back in my chair, and let the silence fill the room. I thought of Hank, of how he'd always said, if someone shows you who they are, don't wait for them to change. I looked toward the box of his old papers in the corner and stood up to open it. The box had been sitting in the corner since I moved in. I'd told myself I wasn't ready to open it yet, that I needed to get settled first, that some memories could wait. But after watching that video, I couldn't wait any longer. I carried the box to the kitchen table and cut through the tape. Inside were folders, receipts, and envelopes yellowed around the edges. Hank had always been organized, even in the small things. It felt like he'd packed his life into these neat stacks, knowing one day I'd have to face them alone. At first, it was nothing unusual: tax papers, medical bills, his old work correspondence. Then I saw one folder pushed to the bottom, thicker than the rest. On the tab, written in Hank's sharp handwriting, were two words that stopped me cold. Curtis. Private. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were letters, some typed, others written in Hank's careful script. The first one was from Curtis asking for a loan. Just $10,000, Dad. Short-term investment, guaranteed return. The date was from 6 years ago. Another came 3 months later asking for more. There were notes from Hank in the margins, no record of repayment. Don't tell your mother. The next letter was different, an overdue notice from a casino credit department. I felt my chest tighten. Hank had never told me our son gambled. I kept reading each page heavier than the last. Curtis had borrowed, lied, and begged again. Hank had covered for him every time. The last page wasn't addressed to anyone. It was a letter Hank had written, but never mailed. My dearest Dahlia. It began his handwriting, slower, shakier than I remembered. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I didn't tell you what Curtis became, because I feared he'd hurt you. He's not the boy you remember. Please be careful. Don't trust him. He'll come for what he thinks he deserves. My hands trembled as I folded the letter back. The room felt too still, the air too thin. Hank had known all along. I turned off the kitchen light, but sleep wouldn't come. By morning, Curtis and Kiara would be on their way. They arrived just before noon. Curtis didn't knock. He just walked in like he owned the place. Kiara followed her heels, tapping sharp across the floorboards, her smile wide and empty. Behind them came her parents and 2 other couples. I didn't recognize, all dressed in clean linen and expensive sunglasses. No one looked at the shed as they passed it. Curtis greeted everyone like a tour guide. 4 acres, wraparound porch, high ceilings. Mom got lucky, didn't she? I stayed in the kitchen. That morning, I had already started prepping the meal: roast chicken, buttered corn, baked squash. Kiara leaned against the doorframe, her eyes scanning the counters. Can you make sure everything is ready by 6? She asked sweetly. And maybe wear something a little more put together. Last time you forgot the oven mitt and almost burned your hand, remember? I nodded without answering. I hadn't forgotten anything. Dinner was served at the long table I had spent the last week polishing. I poured the wine past the plates and kept quiet while laughter rose and fell around me. No one spoke to me directly. To them, I was the housekeeper who had come with the house. Curtis held court at the head of the table. His voice was loud enough to fill every corner. She was just lost after Dad passed. I didn't want her to fall apart, so I encouraged her to find something with purpose. I told her, buy a farm, Mom. It'll give you something to do. I stopped mid-step, holding the gravy boat. She wouldn't have found this place without my help, he continued. She doesn't handle big decisions well. I set the gravy down. My hands were dry. My voice came steady. This farm is mine. The words floated into the silence like a dropped fork. Every head turned toward me. Curtis went still. Kiara blinked. I bought it. With my husband's money. Your father's dream. You didn't help me, Curtis. You weren't even there. No one said a word. Even the candles seemed to flicker quieter. I reached for a napkin and folded it slowly. Then I looked at Kiara. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. From the drawer beside the stove, I pulled out a folder neatly labeled. I walked back to the table, set it beside the bread basket, and opened it with care. These are the purchase papers, I said, sliding them forward. The farm cost $350,000, not $500. Kiara's father leaned forward, reading with growing discomfort. I was told this was a $700,000 property, he muttered. I'm sure you were, I said. Next came Hank's notes, the debt letters, the handwritten margins Curtis never thought I'd see. I unfolded one slowly, letting the names and numbers breathe in the open air. And these are records from your father. I continued. $80,000 lent, never returned. And this, I reached into my apron pocket and placed my phone in the center of the table, is the plan. I pressed play. The room went still. Curtis's voice spilled out crisp and unbothered. Give her a few weeks. Then we'll get my cousin to sign off, declare her unfit. We sell the farm. Kiara's voice followed, and we put her in a home. Cheapest we can find. You could hear the wind in the parking lot, the casual laughter at the end. No one moved. The guests stared at Curtis like they didn't know him. And maybe they didn't. Kiara's mother put down her wine glass. Her father looked like he wanted to leave. Curtis shot to his feet. "This is insane. You went through my things. You recorded me. I looked at him. No. Someone else saw you. Someone who cared enough to warn me." His face twisted red with rage. "That money was mine." "No, Curtis," I said quietly. "It was your father's. And now it's mine." He looked around the table for support. None came. Not even from Kiara. He had brought them all here to perform a version of our lives. But now the script had run out, and everyone was still watching. He didn't even wait a full week. The first time it was just Curtis at the front gate, pacing like a salesman. He rang the bell 5 times, then banged on the door. I stood just out of view watching the security feed from the camera David had helped me install. "Mom, we need to talk." I was angry. "Okay? You embarrassed me, but we can fix this." I didn't answer. I didn't move. The second time he brought a man in a white coat. "This is Dr. Keller. We just want to make sure you're okay. I'm worried about you." The so-called doctor waved a clipboard like a badge. I called David. He made a few calls of his own and confirmed what I already suspected. The man was no doctor, just another pawn. By the 3rd visit, Curtis wasn't pretending anymore. He showed up after dark headlights off with Kiara, 2 unfamiliar men, and voices raised outside my porch. "We're done asking nicely," he shouted. "You've lost it and everyone knows it. You're just making this worse on yourself." I didn't answer. I stayed in my bedroom, lights off, closet door cracked just wide enough to watch the hallway. Then I heard it. Glass. Shattering. I froze. The sound had come from the kitchen. Footsteps followed, sharp, loud, aggressive. "Mom," he called. "Come out now. You're being ridiculous." I backed into the closet, heart pounding against my ribs, and called David. My voice barely held. "They're inside. Don't move," he said. "Police are already on the way." The footsteps grew louder. Doors opened and slammed shut. I could hear Kiara's voice shaky now. "This is wrong, Curtis. We're breaking in." "Shut up. She's my mother. This is my house." Then the sirens. Flashing red cut across the windows. Voices barked commands. Footsteps turned frantic, scrambled. By the time I stepped out, the house was full of officers. Curtis was in handcuffs. Kiara was crying. David looked at me. "It's over." That night, I changed the locks. All of them. And I didn't sleep. I listened to the quiet and waited for morning. Curtis was given probation. 1 year mandatory therapy, court monitoring. No jail time, but he wasn't allowed within 500 feet of my property. Kiara cooperated in exchange for a lighter sentence. Her statement to the police confirmed everything. The fake doctor. The pressure. Even the plan to declare me unfit and sell the land. She cried during her interview, said she didn't know how far it would go. Maybe she didn't. I didn't forgive her, but I let her leave quietly. Some ghosts don't need to be chased. After the hearing, the shed out back still stood empty. The same shed Curtis had told me to sleep in. For days, I avoided it. I kept the doors locked, windows closed. But one morning, I stood at the threshold, turned the knob, and stepped inside. It smelled of dust and memory. By the end of the week, I had pulled out the rotting shelves and replaced the floorboards. David helped me with the permits. Sarah, the director of a nearby shelter, helped with the rest. We gave it a new name, a quiet name. No sign out front, no website, just referrals and a locked gate with a bell. Margaret came first. 68, thrown out by her son after his new wife moved in. She cried the first night, not out of sadness, but from the silence. Elaine followed. 72, swindled by her grandchildren. She wouldn't touch paperwork for the first 2 weeks. Then one morning, she offered to organize our books. Then came Rose, 59, small and quick-moving, but shaken. Her daughter had been slipping things into her tea. She thought she was losing her mind until her neighbor caught it on camera. We gave them each a room, a garden bed, and a key. They began to plant herbs, tomatoes, zinnias. They started reading again. They sat on the porch in the evenings and talked about everything but what brought them here. One afternoon, I heard laughter outside, the kind that starts small and tumbles. I stepped onto the porch and saw Rose teaching Margaret how to dance barefoot in the grass. I smiled and walked back inside to set the table. David stopped by just after breakfast. He brought flowers, this time wild ones, in a mason jar. He set them down on the counter and leaned back, watching me pour coffee. "He called," he said after a pause. "Curtis." I didn't answer. I waited. "He says he wants to apologize. Says therapy's helped. Says he's ready to make amends." I nodded slowly. "And what do you think?" David shrugged. "I think he's sorry about the consequences." I stirred my coffee. "Tell him I've forgiven him in my heart. Truly. But that doesn't mean I want him here." David didn't argue. He just sipped his coffee and looked out the window where the sun stretched across the back field. Where the shed the house stood strong and full. I walked the land that afternoon. Past the roses Rose had planted along the fence. Past the corner where Margaret kept her garden gloves in a tin pail. The tomatoes were thick on the vine. The porch lights had started to glow. It used to hurt, this place. The walls held every word Curtis had thrown at me. Every moment I had tried to be silent and small. But now the house carried new sounds. Boiling water. Footsteps across the porch. Laughter that didn't ask for permission. At the edge of the field, I paused and looked back. The house stood firm. Yellow light in every window. A woman I didn't recognize years ago might have been sitting in the dark waiting for the phone to ring. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Someone called my name from the kitchen. I turned and walked toward the house, toward dinner, toward voices, toward the life I had built from the ashes of what they tried to erase.